Hi, this is Greg Thomas and welcome to the Welsh-American channel. In part one of early Welsh settlers in America, we documented a number of individual Welsh immigrants who appeared in North America in the early 1600s, like Rhys Jones and Richard Richards. We also examined the short-lived colony of New Cumberland in Newfoundland, Canada. Finally, we mentioned preacher John Miles, who, while suffering religious persecution in Wales, led a group of Welsh Baptists to Massachusetts in 1662. They eventually established the town of Swansea, Massachusetts, and the first Baptist church which stands today as the oldest Welsh church in America. Many other Welsh continue to arrive as individuals or small families to America, and not all because of religious persecution, but for opportunity. One such individual was Miles Morgan, who was born in Llandaff, Wales, and arrived in Boston in April of 1636. His great-great-great-great-grandson, J.P. Morgan, would revolutionize the American business and banking industries and help save the United States from financial collapse in 1907. The large American banking empire the family created was known as the House of Morgan. We will have a video on the Morgan family in the future. 2 decades after Baptists first arrived, Welsh members of the Society of Friends, or Quakers, founded the second and much larger Welsh settlement in America. Why? When Charles II was restored to the English throne in 1660, he instigated a wave of religious intolerance which threatened the rights of several groups to worship in the way they chose, including the Quakers. The Great Court of Sessions in Bala, North Wales, threatened to burn Quakers. This court had previously been established under the 1542 Act, which formerly incorporated Wales within the English legal system. The sessions met twice a year in each Welsh county, administering English law but only in the English language, excluding much of the Welsh population from having access to justice. Of the 217 judges who sat on its benches in its 288 years of existence, only 30 were Welshmen, who were of the gentry class. It is likely that only a handful of these few Welsh members of the sessions even spoke Welsh, continuing to exclude the native culture and population from a fair hearing and equal justice. The Court of Great Sessions condemned the Quakers and threatened their lives. Quakers suffered the worst religious persecutions in Wales because they professed to value the authority of what they called their inner light over any church or even the Bible. Yet many people of all classes joined the Quakers in England and Wales, among them an aristocrat named William Penn, who had Welsh lineage just a few generations back. The derivation of the name Penn is from the early Brythonic language of pre-Roman times, the word pen meaning hill. Before the 7th century, the Old English word pen meant a sheep or cattle enclosure, often built of stone. Penn had an interesting and remarkable life. He was born in 1644 in London, the son of an English naval officer named Sir William Penn and his wife, a Dutch woman named Margaret Jasper. Admiral Penn served the Commonwealth Navy during the War of the Three Kingdoms and was rewarded by Oliver Cromwell with estates in Ireland. Admiral Penn took part in the restoration of King Charles II and was eventually knighted and served in the Royal Navy. Obviously, his son William would grow up with wealth and privilege. Then, young William did the unthinkable which upset Admiral Penn and caused shame on the family. As early as 15 years old, Penn met Thomas Lowe, a Quaker missionary who was criticized by both Catholics and Protestants. Lowe was allowed to visit the Penn household, and during his discourses on the inward light, young Penn himself recalled later that, quote, "The Lord visited me and gave me divine impressions of himself," end of quote. In 1660, Penn arrived at the University of Oxford, where he was enrolled as a gentleman and assigned a servant. However, there were many things at Oxford that bothered young William Penn, and these came to a head when theologian John Owen, himself of Welsh descent, was fired from his deanery at Oxford. Penn and other open-minded students rallied to his side and attended seminars at the dean's house. After Owen was censured again after being fired, students were threatened with punishment for associating with him. Penn openly defied these rules, and his father, Admiral Penn, sent him to Paris hoping that another cultural environment would broaden his mind. Upon returning to England after 2 years abroad, he appeared to his parents as a mature, sophisticated, well-mannered, quote, modish gentleman who had acquired, quote, the vanity of the French, according to a family friend. Penn had developed a taste for fine clothes, and for the rest of his life he would pay more attention to his dress than most Quakers. While back at the family estate in Ireland, Penn began to attend Quaker meetings near Cork. There he once again met with Thomas Lowe, and this reaffirmed Penn's rising attraction to Quakerism. There, Penn himself was arrested for attending Quaker meetings as persecutions against them continued. Rather than state that he was not a Quaker and thereby dodge any charges, he publicly declared himself a member and finally joined the Quakers at age 22. His father disowned him, and soon Penn lived with various Quaker families, nearly homeless at times. Soon Penn became a close friend of George Fox, the very founder of the Quakers, whose movement had started in the 1650s during the tumult of Oliver Cromwell's Revolution. Back in England in 1668, Penn was imprisoned in the Tower of London after writing a tract entitled The Sandy Foundation Shaken. After he was released, Penn demonstrated no remorse for his aggressive stance and vowed to keep fighting against the wrongs of the Church of England and the King. The English crown continued to confiscate Quaker property and jailed thousands of Quakers. From then on, Penn's religious views effectively exiled him from English society. He was expelled from Christ Church, a college at Oxford University, for being a Quaker, and was arrested several times. With his father dying, Penn wanted to see him one more time to patch up their differences. The old admiral had gained respect for his son's integrity and courage, and told him, quote, "Let nothing in this world tempt you to wrong your conscience," end of quote. Knowing he would not be there to protect his son in the future, the admiral wrote to the Duke of York, an heir to the throne, the Duke, who would be the future James II, and the King, in return for the admiral's lifetime of service to the crown, promised to protect the young Penn and make him a royal counselor. So Penn was not disinherited, and he came into a large fortune upon his father's death. He went on to missionary work in both Holland and Germany. Between 1671 and 1677, William Penn made trips to Germany on behalf of the Quaker faith, ultimately resulting in a German settlement in Pennsylvania. Seeing conditions for Quakers deteriorating, Penn decided to appeal directly to the King and the Duke on behalf of the Quakers. Penn offered a solution which would solve the Quaker persecutions: a mass emigration of English Quakers to North America. Some Quakers had already moved there, but the New England Puritans were as hostile towards Quakers as the Anglicans in England were. Some of the Quakers who had arrived in New England had been banished to the Caribbean. In 1677, a group of prominent Quakers, that included Penn, purchased the colonial province of West Jersey, half of the current American state of New Jersey. Penn pressed his desire to greatly extend the Quaker region. To Penn's surprise, the King granted an extraordinarily generous charter, which made Penn the world's largest private landowner with over 45,000 square miles. Penn became the sole proprietor of a huge tract of land west of New Jersey and north of Maryland, and gained sovereign rule over the territory, with all rights and privileges except the power to declare war. The land of Pennsylvania had belonged to the Duke of York, who was willing to give it up. But in return, 1/5 of all gold and silver mined in the province was to be remitted to the king. Turns out it had virtually none. Also, the crown was freed of a debt to the late Admiral Penn of £16,000, equal roughly to about £3 million today. Penn first called the area New Wales. In a letter to a friend, Robert Turner, in January of 1681, Penn wrote, quote, "This day my country was confirmed to me under the Great Seal of England with privileges by the name of Pennsylvania, a name the king would give it in honor of my father. I chose New Wales, being as this is a pretty hill country, but Penn being Welsh for a head, as Penmanmoire in Wales, and Penrith in Cumberland, and Penn Buckinghamshire, the highest land in England," end of quote. Penn continued a few sentences later, "For I proposed when the secretary, a Welshman, refused to have it called New Wales, Sylvania, and they added Penn to it. And though I much opposed it, and went to the king to have it struck out and altered, he said 'twas passed. In other words, the king said, there's nothing that I'm willing to do about it." King Charles II insisted on the name Pennsylvania in honor of the late Admiral Penn. On March 4th, 1681, the king signed the charter, and the following day Penn prophetically wrote, quote, "It is a clear and just thing, and my God, who has given it to me through many difficulties, will, I believe, bless and make it the seed of a nation," end of quote. Penn then traveled to America, and while there he negotiated Pennsylvania's first land purchase survey with the native tribe, the Lenape people. Penn felt that it was right and fitting to also purchase the land from the Native American inhabitants. Penn purchased the first tract of land under a white oak tree on the 15th of July, 1682. Penn drafted a Charter of Liberties for the settlement, creating a political haven, guaranteeing free and fair trial by jury, freedom of religion, freedom from unjust punishment, and free elections. In about 1681, a group of Welsh Quakers met with William Penn to secure a grant of land in which they could live as a Welsh community using their own language. The parties agreed on a tract covering 40,000 acres to be constituted as a separate county whose people and government would conduct their affairs in Welsh. It became known as the Welsh Tract, also called the Welsh Barony. It was located just to the west of the city of Philadelphia. The original settlers, led by John Roberts, had negotiated with William Penn the tract to be a separate county whose local government would use the Welsh language. Unfortunately, contrary to Penn's assurances, the barony was never formally created. But the many Welsh settlers gave their communities Welsh names that survive to this very day. The Welsh Tract's boundaries were established in 1687, but in violation of the prior agreement, because by the 1690s, the land had already been partitioned among different counties rather than being its own county. Despite appeals from the Welsh settlers, the tract never gained self-government. Yet this new Pennsylvania colony initially attracted a small group of Welshmen, who arrived in the New World shortly before Penn himself in 1682. Despite the disappointment and the hardships of the early years, these Welsh settlers were so successful in establishing their farms and so enthusiastic about their new home that they were able to persuade others to join them. Significant numbers of people, in some cases whole communities, began to leave Wales. A second wave of Welsh immigration began at the end of the 17th century, but ceased completely by the first quarter of the 18th century. The area of the original Welsh Tract in Pennsylvania is now part of Montgomery, Chester, and Delaware counties. Many towns in the area still bear Welsh names, such as North Wales, Lower Gwynedd, Upper Gwynedd, Lower Merion, Upper Merion. Ballakinwood, Radnor, and many, many other place names. By 1700, it is estimated that Welsh people accounted for about 1/3 of the colony's estimated population of 20,000. The Pennsylvania Provincial Council helped govern the province of Pennsylvania from 1682 to 1776. Records show the Welsh were especially numerous by 1700, politically active, and elected 9% of the members of the Pennsylvania Provincial Council. A second Welsh tract, consisting of 30,000 acres, was granted to Welsh immigrants by William Penn in 1701. It comprised what is today called Pencanter-Hundred, Delaware, and some of Cecil County, Maryland. Next time, in Part 3 of Early Welsh Settlers in America, we will see how the founders of this Welsh tract played an important role in colonial America. Their descendants would contribute to the founding of a new nation, and many would migrate from the Welsh tract to Welsh communities in Ohio, Tennessee, and other western lands. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel or give us a like, and please feel free to make any comments below. This is Greg Thomas saying Hoylem Naur, bye for now.